you say no to people if they're coming in and wanting something that totally distorts them?
I think as providers, it is so important that we have to remember, number one, this is medicine. I know, it's fun medicine, but it's still medicine. You have providers that are not willing to tell these people no. And so it is given this narrative that, why would you ever change the things that God has given you?
Yeah.
Right? It's really about patient safety, making sure it's not even about augmenting them to something that they were not. It's sometimes just shaving back the clock or shaving back time a little bit and giving them a little bit of confidence that they may have lost.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Access Las Vegas. My name is Sharelle Mendenhall, your host, and today I am so excited. It has taken me since the beginning of time to get this woman on this set, but we made time, we shifted to a different day, and we're here. So you guys, welcome Jady Robinson.
Thank you for that.
As far as my friends, you have such a unique job. You have a unique career, and your passion and your view towards it, I've never heard anyone talk about it the way you do. So if you can, tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I am a board certified registered nurse. I have been in the aesthetic space for a little over 13 years. I'm very passionate about what I do. My path of how I got here was a little unconventional. So I actually started my career on the sales side, working for some of these big manufacturers. And that's where I kind of understood the passion that came from within based on some things that were different concepts when we were talking about facial rejuvenation, more three-dimensional. Back when I started in the aesthetic space, we kind of filled lines, like if there was a hole in the wall, kind of like filling it with spackle, and we couldn't ever figure out why does that patient look so odd? They started looking like Planet of the Apes. I'm like, why is that? So, as different products came to the U.S. market and the shift became about really understanding facial anatomy and how we age, and conceptually, the way we approach things is completely polar opposite than how it was when I first started. That's where my passion sort of became stimulated. And I was always sort of the internal science nerd. I kind of did a lot of my own homework, would watch things endlessly. And that's where I knew I was really in the right space. And the thing that really got me to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to bite the bullet, go to school, even though I already had a degree and that was 20 years prior. But what I loved about it is what I would see in terms of the transformation with the patient. And I'm not talking about just the physical transformation. I'm really talking about this internal shift where I would see women, rebuild confidence. I would see women that would see themselves in a different way when we would present some of the things that had been bothering them or things that would make them very self-conscious. And so sometimes they would be a little retracted on things that they were willing to be brave enough to try. So sometimes I would see they would have passions that they would want to pursue, but again, self-doubt. The enemy loves to give, self-doubt, questioning yourself. So this to me was sort of a catalyst to allow them to say, hey, you know what? I am worthy of this. It's not about, and I think the misconception too regarding aesthetics is I think people think because it's this exterior thing, it's only superficial. Right? And so I think probably why you've been trying to get me here is because my passion really lies on, what's within. And I see the shift that people have had and have made remarkable, strides in their own personal achievements based on just that center of confidence. And I think that's where my passion comes from.
And that is why we're talking about, Botox and Dysport and all these different things that are the neurotoxins. So you have that world, and then you have the fillers, and then you have the natural options that people are coming up with, and then the brand new things that are peptides, and everybody's talking about the new trends. But I want to kind of walk through this with you.
Yeah.
Because, again, I want to address it head on, that they feel that anytime you do anything to your body that God gave you, that it's bad. There's just that weird misconception. But the way you talk about it is just like, no, like, I'm not trying to change what God created. I want to enhance. I want to help. So tell me a little bit just about that part.
Unfortunately, the narrative has shifted because of what people see on social media, or maybe it's television, where they've seen the space of whatever Real Housewife of what county, that, you have providers that are not willing to tell these people no. And so it is given this narrative that, like, why would you ever change the things that God has given you, right? And sometimes it's not even about that. There are those that, yes, sometimes there are some mental challenges. And listen, I deal with that because the reality is when a patient sits in a chair, you're very vulnerable, right?
That's a good point.
And so I want to make sure I'm compassionate to that as well. So I really want to understand the driving force as to why they're sitting in my chair in the first place. It's not just about, I'm going to make all this money, because it's not about that for me. It's really about patient safety, making sure, like, it's not even about augmenting them to something that they were not. It's sometimes just shaving back the clock or shaving back time a little bit and giving them a little bit of confidence that they may have lost. A lot of times I say, I really pride myself on holistic type treatments. I'm really looking at natural. A lot of people, they say facial balancing, that's like the thing that resonates with people, but it's really about harmony. And so I'm not trying to take a patient and say, okay, I want to now create a totally different celebrity that maybe you've been obsessed with. That's not what I do. I understand the aging process. I mean, I share with patients, I'm 50, hormonal shifts, especially when we go through, I'm perimenopausal, when we go through menopause and we change and shift from hormones in particular, that actually affects the way our skin functions. And so talking about these things, it's not just about putting fillers in people or toxins, what people think are, why would you put that snake venom in it? It's like, no, I want to give you proper education. I want to empower people to make decisions based on what's appropriate for them, right? And we don't have to do like full steam ahead. Sometimes it's baby steps. But I'm also very real with people too. If they come in trying to dictate certain treatment plans, or they want the same thing that their friend had because they liked that look and their anatomy doesn't fit that, I'm going to be very honest with them.
That was going to be one of my questions. It's like, will you say no to people if they're coming in and wanting something that totally distorts them?
I think as providers, it is so important that we have to remember, number one, this is medicine. I know, it's fun medicine, but it's still medicine. So number one, we do no harm. So patient safety is always first, right? The other thing is, I've seen over the years, I've seen providers that are now going to school specifically because they just want to get into aesthetics. And you had mentioned this, like, what is my sort of recommendation for those wanting to break in? A lot of nurses, and listen, even when I was in nursing school, they're like, I want to get into aesthetics. I tell people, listen, you don't get into aesthetics without having some sort of medical background and experience first. I know many providers, especially nurses, they don't want to be in the hospitals. It's very challenging working bedside. But I tell them, my suggestion is actually get into the hospital, do something in medical for a good solid 2 years. Why? Because that leads into critical thinking. You understand how to actually pivot based on whatever is in front of you. You deal with all different types of patients, right? So I believe it just makes them a better provider. So when they step into the medical aesthetics space, you're going to deal with these types of scenarios, but just at a different level. right?
That's good.
And then also I tell people, please don't get into this space for the sake of the money, because this is the part that I see can be very challenging.
Right.
I believe this is why we are where we are, because you have some, unfortunately, you know, they say you have a bushel of great apples, but there's only a couple that can lead into the rest sort of being deemed as rotten,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
And so the reality is, you know, sometimes you have people that are not willing to say no for the sake of making that money.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you get a bad outcome or safety is compromised. And what that does is then they tell their friends, their family.
Yeah.
So it's not just not good for the patient, but it's not good for the industry as a whole.
I mean, there's a whole show called Botched.
Yeah.
I haven't watched the show specifically,
Yeah.
but I've seen clips of people coming in with a picture and be like, make me look like this.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they'll do it.
Yeah. Or
It-
try. Say
That's a
that,
good point.
Say that they can.
Correct.
And you know,
And then
there's
they come out
limitations.
botched.
Yes, absolutely.
And they come out looking distorted. They don't look healthy.
Yes.
And I really think that it needs to be something that's squashed, because it's
Yeah.
not something that's true. It is not something that everyone is. You just need to be wise in choosing who you partner with.
That's right.
As you're doing the same thing with your hair, your diet, your nutrition,
That's
like
right.
anybody who's working with you to be the best version of yourself.
That's right. I feel like, you know, as individuals, like God has gifted us with so many different amazing talents and purpose, right? And so my purpose in what I've discovered in my tenure is that obviously it's about the connection I have with people.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times, and you've probably seen it so many times, where I've had a patient again being very vulnerable, not just on the exterior. Maybe it's life circumstances, right? I can't tell you how many times I've prayed over patients because I just feel their spirit is just in need of that,
Yeah.
right? I joke about, I'm like, I feel like the aesthetic chair is like, we're like the new bartender in the space where, you know, you get people that will just bare their soul.
Yeah.
But it's true,
Yeah.
right? You have this connection to people, and I can't tell you how many times it's just as fulfilling for me understanding like God is, in my opinion, gifted me with discernment in this path. I also do clinical education, and I travel all over the country all the time, which is why I know you're like, I gotta get you to like commit to a
Yes,
day.
come here.
Which I absolutely love. This is the
Yeah.
perfect season, and God continues to surpass my expectations. So I'm so grateful. But at the end of the day, it's not even about the physical aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's really about connection.
Yeah.
It's that spiritual connection that I'm able to have with these people.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I do something, I'm always praying like, Lord, let me be a vessel. Let me be a light.
Yeah.
Just
So good.
representing his goodness.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what people feel is we are able to bond on a deeper level.
So powerful. It is so powerful because it could be these tiny little insecurities that are
Yeah.
aesthetics that you
Totally.
can't fix in the gym. A simple, small change.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I was absolutely terrified,
Yeah.
you know, of anything aesthetics because I did not want to change the way I
Yeah.
looked. It was
Totally.
terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, and so my entry was PRP.
Yeah.
You know, like I was like,
That's
okay,
right.
that's what I want. You know, like I want to take my own blood and inject that back in because it's just going to cause like cell turnover and youthfulness. That was where like you begin to understand and trust though
Yes.
someone.
Yes.
And saying, hey, I hear you,
Yes.
and you're not going to push all these other things on
No.
me because I'm genuinely terrified of changing what I look like.
Right.
But when you find someone you trust, you're like, oh, okay, I just want to age gracefully.
That's right.
So that when, you know, I'm on TV, when I'm walking in a room, it's just that simple, youthful, constant thing that I feel on the inside.
For sure.
And it's not going to change
Yeah.
anything other than just like, it feels good.
You know, as much as people don't want to admit, we do live in a world that the way you present yourself matters. That's the truth. It would be the same concept if I had, let's say, this rare diamond, and I threw a diamond in a plastic bag or maybe a paper bag crumpled, or I put it in a, box that has a bow that I've wrapped so, meticulously. It's the way I present it, right?
Yeah, that's
so
good.
even though, like, I know my value internally, but at the same time, like, I also want that to match of how I present to the world. And I don't think that is wrong, or I don't think we should be shameful in that.
No.
I feel like, when you can present the best version of yourself, the
Yes.
things that God has, blessed you with, it just carries a little bit more weight.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%.
And so I don't want people to think that it's always this like artificial, superficial industry.
Yeah.
No, sometimes I call it pumping the brakes on the aging process.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Why do we take time to choose our wardrobe?
Yeah.
Why do
Same.
we take
Yeah.
time to go to the gym?
Yeah.
Why do we take time to do our best to eat healthy and find balance, right?
Right. And I want to take it from it just being okay to being celebrated. It's just like,
Yes.
it's not just that it's okay, it is celebrated to be able to
Yes.
find someone you trust who can actually walk with you on this journey to make you feel beautiful. God created
Yes.
beauty.
Yes.
God created beauty. And there's a
Yes.
difference between being, self-absorbed
Yes.
and just so it is. It's so self-absorbed that that's all you care about, that it's only aesthetics, and you don't care about what God's created you to be or who He's created. So if you're
Right.
just focused on the outside, that's a completely different process.
Right.
But when we're going on our journey, when we're going on our destiny, and we dress the way God's called us to dress, even
Yes.
if you have one outfit, have it pressed, have it ironed.
That's right.
Do your best. Use a lint roller.
That's right.
Whatever it is. If you have at that moment, do the best with what you have in your hand.
That's right. 100%.
We have one body.
That's right.
Do
That's
the
so
best
true.
with what we have. So you
Totally.
talked a little bit about you want to pray with them, you're passionate, but there's always so many new trends that come along.
Yes.
And people who don't research
No.
might just jump in on it, right?
Yes, absolutely. One of the biggest things is when you're trying to find the right provider, the right fit, ask lots of questions. Research, see who they are, check to see if they're licensed. I can't tell you how many times, yes, it's the unfortunate part about certain aspects of the industry. There are those that fake their licensure.
No
Yeah,
way.
that you hear of these things, like you talked about botched.
Yeah.
A lot of times, sometimes these women in these specific markets, they get preyed on. And sometimes you get, providers from other countries that come in and they don't want to go through the process to get licensing. The problem with that is when you are not licensed, you have no accountability. And I've seen that time and time again where, certain states, they sort of are loose with the literature of what they allow in terms of the medical
interesting.
board, the
Okay,
nursing
okay.
board. So sometimes they may say, if you have a collaborative physician that takes the liability, you don't necessarily have to be licensed. But the problem with that, and what I've seen time and time again, and actually Nevada used to be the same until they changed the law. Now you have to be at least a minimum of a registered nurse. But back in the day, I used to joke, but you could technically be the janitor as long as you had a medical director to cover you. Now, the problem I would see is if they ran into issues, it's easy for them to bounce to the next practice, right? Because then they may prey on another provider to say, look at all these patients I have this following, you're going to make so much money, you need to cover me. And I've seen these providers bounce, and then they bounce. And the unfortunate part is you have now the provider that took the liability for the short-term monetary purpose, and now their license is compromised because of whatever may have happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it ends up being very challenging, and that's why I urge patients, if you're seeking somebody, research it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as look up their licensure. It's all public information.
Okay.
So much you can find on the internet. You can see who's licensed, who's not licensed. Do they have any, things against their license, like demerits or probation, you'll be able to see all that stuff. It's public record.
Wow.
And then ask questions.
Okay.
I am really big on word of mouth. I don't just take all patients personally because I want to make sure it's a right fit for both of us.
Yeah.
So
because you love what you do.
Well, I love what I do. And if it's a patient that is unfortunately a little dysmorphic and they're never going to be satisfied because that's a deep-rooted
That's a good point.
internal, issue within them, right?
Yeah.
I am very compassionate to that because I still want to connect with people, but I also know that it's not going to be the right fit for me.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I'm never going to make that patient happy.
That's a good point.
Yes.
That's a very good point.
So I'm very particular even for myself in my screening process.
There's so much more that goes into this, especially
yeah.
if you're not just in it for the money.
Yes,
Like, just even hearing you talk about, first off, the compassion.
Yeah.
The fact that they're so vulnerable,
Yes.
in front of you. Because they're sharing their insecurities.
Totally.
Then if they're a right fit, being able to tell them no.
And there's power in no. I think that's my other thing I like to tell, providers that are getting into the space that are newer into aesthetics. I always tell people as I teach across the country, even engagements that I may have with them, I'm like, don't allow it to stop here. Number one, invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Invest in your continued education. It's so very important because this is its own specialty. Like you may be a plastic surgeon and you've gone through fellowship training and, you've done extensive training regarding surgery, but medical aesthetics is its own specialty and people don't realize it until they really immerse themselves in it. And they're like, okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, make sure your intentions, your heart is in the right place, not for the sake, again, of just the monetary gain.
Yeah.
Really being like patient-centric focused.
Yeah.
And then also making sure, they take time with patients because you get to be in some of these busy practices and it's just this mill, right? I personally, that's not my favorite model because I feel like it takes away from my ability to connect with people.
Right.
So that's why I've decided to shift and kind of go my own way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think we all have a responsibility, right? We have to do our part to find the right person and who's going to be the right fit for us long term.
So with that, for them to be able to be interviewed by you, to be a client, how do they get a hold of you?
My business name is Just Right Aesthetics. So currently I'm practicing with a few other nurse practitioners off of Decatur and the 215, but I am currently working on a big project with my husband, who has been in the wellness and the fitness industry for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
So you talk about a expert in his field, and so we are working on a very big project, TBD, but hopefully that's going to come to fruition. I say, God, if your hand is in it, it will just come organically, and it seems like everything has just been rolling that way. So
it comes organically, but you guys work so hard. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to give that prerequisite. So it does. Like God's backing you up because you guys are putting in the work.
When we talk about wellness, I really think of mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
Right? It should encompass all aspects.
Amen.
So even from the physical fitness side.
Yeah.
We understand when we really look at the patient holistically. I'm very transparent with people. I've had my own battles and struggles with, metabolic issues. And I will tell you, peptides has completely changed my ability to just allow my metabolism to start functioning again.
Yeah.
Getting me to a point where I feel good again in my skin. My organs are functioning the way they once were.
Yeah.
So it's all of these things that we want to encompass because that's really what it's about, right?
Okay, you didn't even tell me this. We're sitting in the chair, so now my head is now I need to know the name. Now I need to know where it's at. And next time we're gonna have you both on when it's not a TBD, when it actually has a name that can be announced to the world.
Yes. Or it will be Aura Strength and Wellness, and then the aesthetic side will be within that entity. So, again, it's going to be very specific, but we really want to encompass all things to make sure that we're meeting the needs, especially to the community in particular, and that we're allowing people to just be their best, feel their best, be able to walk in God's purpose. Because I know that we all have a purpose.
We do. And so I'll be telling you guys when the grand opening is, so we can go all out there and support. But you alluded to it, and I could camp out in this, topic, because we do. God has a purpose in your life.
Yes.
God has a destiny. You guys are and have accomplished so much, and you've continued. When it was time, you went back to school, and you're doing what you're passionate about. You guys have done so many different businesses and had success.
Yes.
And then God's called you to a new chapter in life. And so you're going again to a new chapter in life, but you're putting in the work. And I think that's so necessary when people are dreaming with God. It's you put in the work and you watch his hand and his blessing on it. And then you're like, wow, God, thank you.
You know the story. It's just I've had a crazy ride, even when I took a very large step back to go back to school and all the sacrifices. And to be honest with you, God had been nudging me and nudging me and nudging me. And finally, it was like, okay, I am literally in this season walking by faith and not by sight.
Amen.
And as I continue to get closer, and I know the journey was nothing but God.
Yeah.
I mean, the testimony is like, even when I sometimes sit back and reflect on it, it still blows my mind. But the reality is, I know, if it wasn't for God, I don't know if I would have been brave enough to really take the leap. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
And, getting to a point, especially as I was getting closer to reaching God's promise and walking into what God had been telling me to push me to take that leap. I mean, you talk about what the enemy meant for evil, God will take for his glory. And that's really what it was, because I will tell you, the enemy at that time was throwing everything at me. And when I say, my brother passed unexpectedly, my husband had we call it idiopathic, meaning we didn't know where it came from. It was spontaneous, neurological situation where he had to have emergency neurosurgery. We were out of state. I was in clinicals. I was having to take exams. I couldn't miss. So I'm literally flying back and forth from the hospital to the hospital doing rotations. And then my dad became, so sick. My house flooded. I mean, the craziest part of that journey was, it was almost comical, because so many things were being thrown at me, like left and right, that I finally got to a point I was like, all right, let's bring it on, enemy, because I knew I was so close to everything that God had been promising that I knew the enemy was trying to do everything in its power to derail me. So that was the mindset that I had to keep in that season, because otherwise I would have crumbled. That's the truth. But I was like, no, I know that God's promise is going to come to fruition, right?
Amen.
He has shown me this in so many different ways, and he continues to surpass my expectation.
Girl.
Literally. It's
so
just
good.
It's one of those things that I'm like, I will forever sing Jesus's praise because of the things that he has shown me.
I'm going to have to bring you back for 2 and 3 sessions and bring in your husband as well. And you have to give me the insight on the date on when the launch is, so I can share it with everybody watching. You guys, I promise to get this to you, but that's the end of our time. So thank you so much for joining us. I genuinely want to just keep going, because it's so many layers to success, to God, to beauty, to how you feel, to what he's called you to. There's so much to it. And you embody that. And I'm so proud to have you as a friend and watch you guys in your success and see God's hand on it. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us on Access Las Vegas. This has been a journey to get us here, but you can see it was worth it. So thank you. Have a great day.
Access Las Vegas is hosted by Sharelle Mendenhall. Follow her online at Sharelle Mendenhall. Thank you to Jady Robinson for being our guest on this week's episode. Follow her on Instagram at Jady Robinson. And follow us on social media at Access Las Vegas and at CTN Vegas.